In late 1980s and early 1990s, the Kenyan public was treated to collapse of banks. Who was behind this public rape? This is the true story of Hezi Bezalel, a real murderer and the most corrupt individual Israel has ever nurtured. Bezalel was born in Basra, Iraq and moved with his family to Israel when he was 5 years old. The family settled in the Or Yehuda absorption camp and later on moved to Ramat Gan. During his military service, he served as a tank commander in the Yom Kippur War. He later began his economic studies at the Tel Aviv University. Following the completion of his MA in economics, he began teaching at the Tel Aviv University as well as the Ben Gurion University in Be'er Sheva. He worked as Professor Chaim Ben Shach's teaching assistant and initiated his PhD studies in London. He moved from Israel to Kenya in 1984 and teamed up with Nicholas Biwott, the total man as he was popularly known, who was married to an Israeli national. With IHS subtle and crafty character, Hezi was able to convince the then Minister for Energy and Regional Development to establish an investment bank in Nairobi called Trade Bank. Trade Bank hit the road running and became the bank of choice. Government institutions and public was cheated into parting with their well-earned. Hezi, being the mastermind, was able to open many other companies with late Biwott. They siphoned money to other companies that they owned and later sold to Al Noor Qasim when it was on its deathbed, according to report named Kroll on Biwott, Trade Bank and Export Financing. The Kenya Kroll report alleged that Nicholas Biwott, according to source A, Al Noor Qasim, was involved with exporting financing fraud to a quantum of about 700 million through Trade Bank. Did Kroll get it right? Biwott's lawyer said, "A commission of inquiry into the Goldenberg scandal investigated this allegation and found conclusively that Nicholas Biwott and his companies had not been involved in export financing." The source investigates. It is clear from the Bossire report into the Goldenberg scandal that Trade Bank was heavily implicated in the export financing fraud. The timings of Trade Bank's fraudulent activities in this regard are important in relation to any implication that Biwott was involved. Kenya's pre-exporting finance scheme was introduced in December 1990 and terminated in March 1993. The available evidence indicates that this was after Al Noor Qasim, Kroll's source A, assumed control and management of the bank. The Kenya Kroll report does not name Biwott as a party to the export financing fraud. The source is uncertain as to whether Kroll was trying to implicate him in this regard, or merely repeated Qasim's allegations without checking their veracity or the reliability of the source. Had they done so, they would have discovered that source A, Qasim, was found by the High Court of Kenya, a decision upheld by the appeal court, to have fraudulently transferred the ownership of the Yahya Center from Nicholas Biwott to support a massive loan to build the Trade Bank Center, fraudulently transferred money that resulted in the collapse of Trade Bank, and was wanted by Interpol for questioning. There was, however, a suggestion in the East African Standard, reporting on the Goldenberg inquiry, on the 7th of May 2004, that Biwott's HZ group of companies were connected to a number of companies which Trade Bank used to obtain pre-shipment finance for fictitious exports. The companies in question were identified as Gawi Freighter Limited, Air Maritime and Wilgo Agencies Limited. The East African Standard, however, does not give the basis upon which the companies were linked to Biwott. Nor is it apparent from the reproduced transcripts of evidence, since Biwott was not one of those named as a shareholder or director of any of the three companies. According to the transcripts of evidence at the Goldenberg inquiry, former CBK Deputy Governor Eliphaz Riungu gave evidence on the 21st of April 2004 that the directors and shareholder of Gawi Freighter and Wilgo Agencies were P.K. Langat, P.A. Yego, Wilfred Yego, Samuel Yego, A.K. Abdi and Bezalel Hezi. Riungu confirmed that he did not have any personal knowledge that the companies were related to Biwott. Basically, Hezi was the kleptomania in the late Biwott's empire, and by the time they fell out with while at Trade Bank, he groomed a bunch of cronies and straighted another bank called Eurobank, which included his long-term lawyer Mr. Firdosh Jamal, Solomon Muthamia, Zachary Kamondo and former Kenya Revenue Authority boss John Munge. Bezalel was the main financier and his goal was to steal money from the government agencies and parastatals. With the help of late Biwott, he was able to recruit most government agencies. Hezi Bezalel has activated his links in Kenya again. For close to 30 years he has not done business in Kenya using his names because he fell out with the late Nicholas Kipyator Kiprono Arap Biwott, after he blocked the sewerage system in Yahya Center Block B because he was denied major shareholding in the mall. Also, he had fallen out with the late John Munge because John felt that Hezi used them as directors in Eurobank to swindle the Kenyan public for his own personal interest. Hezi feared the two, since his money from all African countries is wired to Kenyan banks. He operates a mafia-like cartel where he is not registered as director or shareholder, but the companies are registered by his concubines, girlfriends and associates. Now Hezi is back in Kenya, with the Kenya Kwanza administration. Our whistleblower informs us that Hezi is now in control of Parliament, DCI and the armed forces. In our next episode we shall be able to put into focus the contracts the Ruto administration has awarded this criminal who wants to swindle the public for the second time. The big question is, will the lightning strike twice? Does the president know who he is dealing with? Do his advisors do background tests for individuals before they give contracts? We shall also focus on how he is arming M23 in DRC, Ivory Coast, South Sudan and time allowing we look at his role in Liberian's conflict. Produced by We the Whistleblowers Africa.